Hey everyone, and welcome to this explainer. Today we're tackling something absolutely massive. We are going to take all that overwhelming, crazy hype around enterprise AI and transform it into a structured, highly actionable playbook. We're drawing directly from a really fascinating conversation between Michael, the head of AI at Section, and Raghu, a top tech leader over at UiPath. They get right into the weeds of how real companies are actually deploying AI agents, not as some sci-fi fantasy, but as strategic, manageable business tools. So we're going to break down their insights into a clear guide that you can literally take straight to your next strategy meeting.
Okay, let's dive into this, because honestly, this is the exact question keeping executives up at night right now. Are you suffering from AI FOMO, that fear of missing out? You hear your competitors are building these automated fleets, and it just feels like you're falling way behind. But as Raghu points out, we kind of need to reframe our thinking here. AI is an incredibly powerful tool. Think of it as a highly capable coworker. But it is absolutely not a magic wand that's going to instantly transform your complex workflows overnight. I mean, as much as we all secretly wish it could just magically do our expense records, right? Treating it like a fantasy cure-all is basically step one toward a failed deployment.
So to avoid that, here is our 6-step strategic playbook. We're covering everything from curing that FOMO to governance and finally, the human-agent partnership. We'll break this whole overwhelming topic down into highly logical, actionable steps.
All right, kicking things off with Section 1, Curing Enterprise AI FOMO. Let's set some expectations.
Before you write a single line of code or, spend $1 on compute, you absolutely have to set the right foundational expectations. Raghu's starting advice is incredibly practical here. Beat your FOMO by building basic proficiency right on your own desktop first. Before you attempt to automate some massive, complex back-office operation, like an order-to-cash process that spans 3 departments and takes weeks to finish, you need to start small, learn by doing. Have your team build simple plugins or just use a desktop copilot to summarize a few documents. Treat AI as a personal productivity tool first, just to build your intuition about what these models can actually do. Once you get that, then you can start identifying those larger processes that deliver clear, measurable bottom-line value. Moving on to Section 2. Agents versus deterministic software.
Now, what's really interesting about this slide is that it highlights the foundational pivot of our whole strategy. There is a stark contrast between standard code and AI. And honestly, one of the most expensive mistakes companies make is using AI when they absolutely shouldn't. Think about it. Deterministic software like a standard API is cheap, it's lightning fast, it works literally 100% of the time, and it has zero chance of hallucinating. AI agents, on the other hand, they're probabilistic. They run on expensive tokens. They're designed specifically for cognitive tasks like extracting context from a messy document or making a judgment call. You should never, ever use a costly, unpredictable AI agent to do a job that a simple, deterministic API call can handle flawlessly.
So, how do we actually weave these two things together without wasting resources? Well, it's a very deliberate 4-step journey. First, you map out your end-to-end business process. Second, you ruthlessly isolate all the deterministic steps and hand those straight over to standard automation software. Third, you deploy your AI agents exclusively into the pockets of the workflow that actually require cognitive extraction or decision-making. And fourth, you build in human supervision for the exceptions. It's really not about replacing software with AI, it's about orchestration. It's like a giant puzzle where you're putting the right tool in the exact right place.
All right, Section 3, the blast radius framework. This is the absolute best mental model for deciding how much autonomy to give an AI.
So you've deployed an agent. How do you decide how much independence to give it? Michael and Raghu outline this brilliant 2-part continuum to rate the danger of a specific task. First up is the blast radius. Literally, what is the total impact or cost to the business if this agent hallucinates or just makes the wrong decision? Second is reversibility. If the agent does make a mistake, how easily can we dial back the clock and undo those actions to restore our previous business state?
Let's look at how this plays out in the real world with some examples Raghu gave. Take a CRM API data pull. There's 0 blast radius, and it's highly reversible. But, as we learned a minute ago, the AI autonomy level here should be 0, because you should just be using standard code. Now, imagine drafting 10,000 marketing emails. The blast radius there is relatively low, and it's highly reversible, so you can safely delegate that to a fully autonomous agent. But what about approving a $50,000 invoice? No way. If the AI gets that wrong, the blast radius is massive, and reversibility is incredibly low. That task demands an agent working with a human in the loop. The AI can prep the data, sure, but a human absolutely must make the final call.
Which brings us to Section 4, Guardrails and Fleet Governance. What happens when we scale up?
Once you understand your blast radius, you're inevitably going to start scaling up. And as these agents move from, cute little desktop assistants to sprawling enterprise-wide fleets, governance becomes non-negotiable. Raghu heavily emphasizes that agents must be strictly single-minded. If you have 3 different tasks, do not build one super agent to juggle the whole shebang. Build 3 separate agents. This drastically narrows the blast radius if one of them fails. You also have to write natural language guardrails, defining not just positive actions, what it must do, but strictly defining negative actions, what it absolutely cannot do under any circumstances. For instance, automatically stripping out personally identifiable information, or PII, before it ever hits an external model. You have to limit the context it sees to only the necessary data.
And to enforce those guardrails, your Center of Excellence needs to run pre-production evaluations. Raghu mentions frameworks like RAGA. Basically, these tests measure an agent's faithfulness, ensuring it sticks strictly to the context you provided. It also measures trajectory adherence. That just means if it's supposed to go from step A to B to C, it doesn't suddenly veer off on some weird hallucinated detour to step Q.
Section 5. Proving the AI ROI. Let's talk about the money. So, you've built a secure, governed fleet of agents. Awesome. But are they actually making you money? Raghu calls this the trillion-dollar question. It's the ultimate reality check for enterprise AI. Does the value generated by automating this process actually outweigh the compute and token costs of running the model? Without an intellectually honest assessment of that math, most enterprise AI projects are completely destined to fail.
And Raghu offers a massive wake-up call right here. He points out that the time and money you save through automation can so easily get eaten up by the inference costs of the agent itself. A huge reason for this? Frontier models, like GPT-4, are vastly overused. You do not need a cutting-edge, super expensive frontier model just to do basic data extraction. Often, downgrading to a cheaper open-source model or just stepping back to deterministic software is the only way to actually protect your ROI.
And this brilliantly illustrates the critical partnership required to earn that ROI. Step 1. The business owner defines the exact ROI target. Step 2. The tech team then selects the cheapest, most effective model to hit that specific target. Step 3. You implement orchestration tracking to monitor how the fleet is doing. And finally, Step 4. You conduct rigorous monthly audits to retire agents that aren't pulling their weight or optimize the ones costing too much.
Finally, Section 6. The Human-Agent Partnership.
We've talked a lot about building and governing these agents. But how are they actually going to change your human workforce? Well, 10 to 1. During their conversation, it was predicted that in the near future, we could see a ratio of roughly 10 agents, or automated skills, supporting a single human employee. 10 to 1. That is an absolutely incredible amount of leverage for one person.
And this brings us to a super fascinating economic concept Raghu brought up from an 1840 statistician, the Jevons paradox. Historically, when the cost of a resource drops, in this case the cost of mundane work dropping to near zero because of AI, our demand for that output doesn't shrink, it literally explodes. As agents take over the grunt work, the demand for high-level, strategic, and creative human output is going to skyrocket. These agents aren't here to replace us, they're here to elevate the whole team.
Which leaves us with this final provocative thought. When the cost of mundane, administrative work in your organization drops to near zero, what strategic heights will your humans reach? The future really belongs to the organizations that don't just deploy agents, but actively empower their people to orchestrate them. Thanks for joining us for this explainer. We hope you learned a ton. Now go start building those skills.